negotiations threatens that. In Glasgow, fossil fuel lobbyists outnumbered Pacific delegates 12 to 1. If I'm not wrong, last year the number rose to 15 to 1. And the number this year is expected to be even higher. We from the Pacific deserve a fair process, free from the clutches of profit-hungry oil CEOs. We deserve clean and affordable renewable energy access for all of us, vulnerable communities especially, something the fossil fuel industry hasn't been able to provide, mind you. And we also deserve to have the lives of real, breathing, living people in the Pacific prioritized before the profits of a few. So I'm here to say the Pacific will be watching very closely. We'll be watching and resolute in our fight because the number of major polluters at COP is absolutely ridiculous. And the world can't simply tell us that we're drowning and let the fossil fuel industry drill holes in our canoes. The Pacific Climate Warriors, some of you may have seen us in actions or seen us at COP, and our cry is, we are not drowning, we are fighting. And part of that fight is ensuring we kick big polluters out of COP and other climate negotiations.
Thank you, Drew, for not only reminding us that that having climate action that is free and not written by the influence of big polluters is not a favor. It is something we are owed and overdue, and for reminding us of the impacts for every minute where that influence goes unchecked. But also, thank you for reminding us of the power that we, as the people around the world united, have to stand up, to resist, and to fight. I'm now going to hand over to David Tong from Oil Change International. David.
Thank you and good morning. The science is incredibly clear. Despite what was reported yesterday, there is no argument against it. We need a phase out of fossil fuels. Credible scientists like Johan Rockström repeated that in response to the reporting yesterday. There is no argument against this. And here at this COP, this phase out must be in the decision text. And it must be full without gambling our futures on risky bets like carbon capture and storage. It must be fast, aligned with a Paris-aligned timeline, fast enough to keep 1.5 within reach. I saw Pacific negotiators in Paris crying tears of joy after their victory in getting that into the text. We must not abandon that. It must, to be possible and to be just, it must be fair, based on equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. Nothing else will secure consensus in these negotiations. And it must be funded with wealthy nations opening up their pocketbooks and supporting others to transition. But a phase out does not begin when you keep phasing in. When you're in a hole, the first step is to stop digging. The phase out must start with ending all new extraction now. This is the science. In 2021, the International Energy Agency confirmed that there was no room for any new oil and gas investment or extraction beyond existing fields and mines in their 1.5 scenario. But their scenario depends on some risky modelling choices, like massive expansion of carbon capture and storage in the next 10 years. If you don't take those risks, peer-reviewed research published by my colleagues at Oil Change International and academics in 2021 shows that more than half of the oil, gas, and coal in existing fields and mines must stay in the ground for 1.5. We updated that analysis this year. 60% of fossil fuels in the fields and mines that are already operating have to stay in the ground for 1.5. We need countries, especially rich countries, to step in and close these polluting industries early. But despite this, rich nations are still continuing to drill and dig for more oil and gas that can never, ever be burned. Our research, published this September, shows that just 5 countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, Norway, and the United Kingdom, are on track to be responsible for more than half of all the oil and gas expansion between now and 2050. It is no coincidence that those 5 countries have a history of obstruction in these negotiations. What's more, our research shows that not one of the big oil and gas companies has anything like a Paris-aligned plan to transition their business. They say they do in their fancy reports, but when you look at the numbers, they don't. We assessed them across 10 criteria, covering ambition, integrity, and people-centered transitions. In sum, all were rated as either insufficient or grossly insufficient. The American majors, ExxonMobil and Chevron, ranked as grossly insufficient on all categories. But even the European majors that some have given credit to continue to go forward with massive fossil fuel expansion. They are responsible for more carbon pollution than their home countries. Total Energies, customers burning the oil and gas itself, emit more than France does. Equinor's customers emit more than 5 times what Norway emits. Eni's customers emit more than Italy does. These companies are responsible for more pollution than their home countries. The so-called Oil and Gas Decarbonisation Charter released on Saturday does nothing to address this. It contains tired, recycled commitments we've seen before from other oil and gas industry commitments. And nothing in it deals with the 80 to 90% of oil and gas producing companies' emissions that come from burning the oil and gas that these companies produce and sell. It's like getting 50 tobacco CEOs into a room to promise to solve lung cancer by making cigarettes more efficiently. And that is why these companies and their enablers, their lobbyists, have no place in these negotiations. Over 100 countries have called for phasing out or phasing down fossil fuels. Representatives from structurally oppressed communities, from frontlines communities fighting fossil fuels, from the countries that have done the least to cause this crisis and are already suffering first and worst, came here to negotiate for their lives. But at the same time, fossil fuel lobbyists have come to negotiate for their wallets. They have no place in these negotiations. Their dirty tricks must not stop us from achieving a fair, fast, full, and funded phase-out of fossil fuels.
Thank you, David, for spelling out so clearly exactly what would need to happen here for these talks to actually deliver on a fossil fuel phase down. And let us make it super clear, if everything that David so beautifully and eloquently illustrated for us that is entirely backed by science, by the principles of the Paris Agreement and the Convention, if all of those things are not delivered, we well know who to blame. We know to blame the fossil fuel corporations who are here in record numbers, undermining every meaningful attempt to pass the action we need. We know to blame those who enable a system that allows that to happen, and particularly the global north governments who are the largest historical emitters and polluters of fossil fuels, and also the greatest climate obstructors here in these halls. I'm now going to hand over to our final speaker, Erica from Fridays for Future MAPA. Eric, over to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Eric Njuguna, a youth climate justice organizer from Nairobi, Kenya. Shell has been on the record bragging about their role in influencing the creation of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement on carbon markets. The reality is that carbon markets are false solutions and only exist to serve the fossil fuel industry's interests by allowing them to claim carbon neutrality without them actually cutting down emissions. the fossil fuel industry has been a bad faith actor in climate negotiations. We have seen their influence in trying to call for unabated fossil fuels, giving room for carbon capture and storage, a technology that does not remove emissions at scale and has no record to show for the decades it has been in existence. If anything, the technology is mostly used for enhanced oil recovery. The real solution to the climate crisis is to stop all new oil and gas exploration and phase out existing production. That implies the very death of the fossil fuel industry as we know it. The fossil fuel industry's presence at the UNFCCC is not an isolated scenario. The fossil fuel industry has a large spheres of influence, having been on boards of banks, being in universities' faculties, being as shareholders of the auto industry, and even more painfully, bankrolling politicians' elections. Many politicians represent the interests of fossil fuel industry and spew fossil fuel industry's talking points, right from the fossil fuel industry's playbook. Their existence in all these spheres of influence is to serve to continue their existence in this world. Here at the UNFCCC, we need a conflict of interest policy. We have had some major wins over the past few years, with now all delegates being compelled to disclose the organizations they represent and the interests they represent in negotiations, which is a major win, but we have a long way to go in making sure that the fossil fuel industry has no place in climate negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for bringing us home, for celebrating our victory we've had together. It's small but mighty, but also for underscoring the fact that we are on a long road. Transparency is just the first baby step towards accountability of these talks and ensuring that they can deliver the action they need. To do that, we need to kick big polluters out of these halls. That means ending their ability to write the rules of climate action. That means ending their ability to literally bankroll these climate talks. It means centering the needs, the experiences, and expertise of those on the front lines. And it means resetting the system so that it prioritizes people, not profit. So yeah, we're angry, we're fed up, we're over it, and we can't understand why we have to keep explaining why fossil fuel lobbyists should not be allowed to be here. I hope after everything you've heard over these past 30 minutes, you're angry too, and you know why. And I hope that you join us and unite with us, because until we do, and until we end the ability of big polluters to undermine every meaningful attempt to deliver the action we need, COP 28, 29, 30, and forevermore will continue to fail to deliver the action we need to save lives here and now. So with that, we have a couple more minutes, and I'd like to hand over to anyone who has questions. If you do, please raise your hands so that a member of the tech crew can help assist with the microphone.
Hello, I'm Nina Lakhani from The Guardian. Surely the responsibility of this, the buck stops with the UN. I mean, it's up to the UN who comes to this conference. It rejects people, it rejects organisations, it throws people out. So this isn't a battle with fossil fuel industry. Surely it's a battle with the UN, is it not?
The UN has a role in approving accreditations, but the rules that allow the UN to decide who can and who cannot be accredited are set by the parties. And so this is a party-driven process. Ultimately, the buck stops with not the Secretariat, but with the governments that are enabling the fossil fuel industry to be here.
Any other questions? If not, I'll hand over to our speakers for one final powerful remark. Brenna, what would you like to say?
Thank you. Fossil fuel lobbyists should not be here. They weave a web of greed and sacrifice zones like the Dakota Access Pipeline. They have received over $3 billion from Bank of America, which is the same bank that's also interested in the Energy Transition Accelerator, an ambitious initiative that was announced by the U.S. Climate Envoy a few days ago. We will not stand by while these false solutions are heralded as the solution to the climate crisis. There is only one solution to the climate crisis: decolonization and an indigenous just transition away from systems of extraction. Okay, thank you.
Before this press conference, I was speaking briefly with a few other Pacific climate warriors about the sheer number of fossil fuel lobbyists present here. And a well-known Pacific climate warrior, Brianna Fruin, spoke to us about it, and she said it's because they're scared. There's more of them here because they know that the age of fossil fuels is coming to an end. It must come to an end. The people have spoken, the science has spoken. All that's left is to ensure that these processes no longer allow them in the room so that our negotiators, our leaders can take the necessary steps to keep us below 1.5 degrees of heating. As the other speakers on this panel have indicated, that road to 1.5 degrees is not through unabated. It's not through qualifiers for the fossil fuel phase out. It's for a full phase out of all coal, oil, and gas, and fair finance for that phase out for those of us that didn't cause this crisis. Vinaka.
David.
You wouldn't invite arms dealers to a peace conference. And the oil lobbyists here at the climate conference must not stop this conference from succeeding in delivering a phase out of fossil fuels. That is what countries from the Pacific, the African group to Europe have collectively demanded. It must be in the decision text.
Eric.
The presence of the fossil fuel industry at climate negotiations, the presence of the fossil fuel industry at its climate negotiations shows the moral bankruptcy of the fossil fuel industry. They have used their space here to derail and impede action and push for false solutions like carbon markets, CCS, and all other nonsense. It is on them that the climate crisis is still severe. I come from Kenya. Communities have faced severe droughts as a result of a drought that hasn't been seen in 40 years. Communities have lost their lives and livelihoods as a result of the climate crisis. That is why we need to kick out the fossil fuel industry so that this space can achieve justice for the communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. This press conference was hosted by the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice. We are members of the Global Network to Kick Big Polluters Out, a network of more than 450 organizations representing millions of people around the world, united in demanding an end to the ability of big polluters to write the rules of climate action. Thank you, and please keep an eye out for our upcoming research. Our panelists are available for interviews just outside if you'd like to find them. Thank you so much.